Welcome to the For Real Though Show, the podcast with a purpose for the peoples. I'm your host, Christopher Keith. Thank you for joining us. As usual, we always ask you to like, subscribe, do all the things. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna put y'all on a little game today that I love being with you guys so much. Okay, so much that today I worked like 11 hours. I worked 11 hours. And I've been working on this particular podcast for a couple of days, kind of doing my research and gathering my thoughts. Sat down, pressed record, did my thing, and then was about to post it and noticed that I didn't have any sound. Now, why I didn't have any sound, I don't know. My equipment was kind of messing up a little bit earlier. I checked my sound and tried to play something. It wouldn't play, so I restarted my computer. It still didn't work. Well, no, actually, it did work. I pressed a few things, and all of a sudden I had sound. So then I went through that thing and did all the things to get the podcast together and stuff, recorded a whole 40 something minutes and didn't have no sound. So, but did your boy give up? No. Did your boy say, you know what? I'll record another day. Did your boy say, you know what? I'm gonna go watch me some Ted Lasso and relax for a little while. Nope. Your boy is right back at it. Okay? Committed, fortitude, concentration. We in here. We here for the people. You know what I'm saying? We're here for the people with a purpose. You know what I'm saying? So, showing y'all some dedication. Show your boy some love. Show me some dedication. Like, comment, subscribe, share, do all the things. So, we're gonna get into this topic today, which is not a super serious topic, but I think it's one worth sharing in that I may not be the only one who feels this way. So we're gonna talk about sports. And we're gonna talk about sports, fandom, and sort of like the childlike innocence that comes along with being a sports fan, okay? So if you grew up like I did, loving sports, then I think, some of you can be able to relate to some of the things that I'm about to share. So, I grew up in the 70s and, began love sports, as a youth, if you will. That's short for youth, right? And my love for sports started with my father taking me to the St. Louis Cardinals game. So, this time in the 70s, and I believe even early 80s, well, mostly in the 70s. Yeah. Yeah, this is definitely in the 70s because my mom and dad were still together. And we were living on 1462 Gady in East St. Louis. And my dad would take me to the Cardinals games, right, in the summertime. And just it would be on any given evening, mostly during the week. It wouldn't necessarily be a weekend game, but definitely during the week because it'd be school nights and stuff. And we would take this like MacArthur Bridge, which isn't open anymore, but MacArthur Bridge, and it would just take you from East St. Louis across the water, across the Mississippi River to St. Louis, Missouri, and it would just drop us off just south of the old Busch Stadium, not the one they got now, but the old Busch Stadium. And so we pull up, about an hour, 45 minutes, before the game, because at that time we would sit in the bleachers. And at that time you couldn't buy season tickets in the bleachers, right? So all the bleacher seats were sold at that time 90 minutes before each game, and they were for $2. $2 each. So it was a very fan-friendly atmosphere to be able to take your son to, which my father did. So, we post up in the bleachers, and be watching cats like Lou Brock at that time, Bake McBride. I remember Reggie Smith. I used to love me some Reggie Smith, man. I love Reggie Smith, the way he had that cap and his afro would stick out of that cap, and he was a switch hitter. You know what I'm saying? He was cold-blooded. Reggie Smith was nice. And other Cardinals like Ken Oberkfell, Ted Simmons, Ted Sizemore, Al Robotsky, the Mad Hungarian. I remember my dad used to tell me, oh, well, okay, so Al Robotsky had this routine that he used to do where, for those who don't know, some of y'all know because y'all old like me and you remember this, but he had this, Al Robotsky was a relief pitcher. And he would come into the game, like if the Cardinals was winning, he'd come into the game in the seventh. Usually the relief pitcher would pitch like the seventh, eighth, and ninth inning back then. And so he'd come in and he'd throw his warm-ups and stuff, and everybody just be waiting on him to finish his warm-up. So when the batter would come up, he would step off the mound, after the warm-ups, and he would just sit there, and he'd be turning toward the outfield. He'd be facing the outfield, and he'd just be sitting there looking all mean and stuff, like he was just really into it, whatever he was thinking. And then all of a sudden he'd come back, take his glove out, take the ball, pop it in the glove, turn around and walk back and stomp to the mound. Like, yeah, I'm finna wreck some shit up. I'm finna tear some shit up. And the crowd would just go nuts, right? And I remember my dad telling me one time, he was like, yeah, son, watch this. Yeah, see, he finna psych himself up. Finna psych himself up. Watch this, son. Uh, so yeah, Al Roboski, and then Keith Hernandez, who was like still my favorite first baseman of all time, like before he joined the Palm Scum New York Mets. Shout out to them winning in '86. Uh, I was mostly mad that the Cardinals let him go. I really wasn't mad at Keith. He was still my favorite first baseman, to this day still. Anyway, I can go on, but I remember sitting there, in the stands in the bleachers with my dad, and these old black male senior citizens, right? And we were listening to the transistor radio, KMOX will be on. And, like the earliest of my memories, and I remember this spry, very young and spry Bob Costas would be there, with the OG Mike Shannon commentating the games. And, this is before Bob Costas was a national figure, with NBC doing Olympics and the NBA and all of that. Well, at that time, he had graduated from Syracuse and came to St. Louis. If I'm not mistaken, man, he might even be from St. Louis. But I remember he went to Syracuse, he came to St. Louis. He was doing the Cardinals games, and he was also doing the play-by-play for the St. Louis Spirits, which was our ABA team. Shout out Marvin Barnes, shout out Moses Malone, who was there for a brief period. If you know, you know. And my dad would take me to see, the Spirits at the Checker Dome, the old Checker Dome. So them was the days, man, needless to say. But I'd sit in the bleachers with my dad. And my dad was like the young G, you know what I'm saying? He's in his 20s and stuff. And the old G's, these cats, man, I don't know, to me, they look like they was 50, 60, 70, you know what I'm saying? Like mostly 70s, you know what I'm saying? That's how they look to me, 60, 70. They was old looking dudes. And I remember as we listened to the game, while we're watching the game, you know what I'm saying? It just made it so much like it was so inclusive and fun, the whole experience. And they wouldn't just talk about the game, though, they talk about world politics and social issues and things that was going on. Like I distinctly remember them talking about Nixon, and I remember them using like the words tricky dick, and I remember I didn't even know what tricky dick meant then, but obviously I know now. And I remember all of this because, like little dudes like me, like I felt like I was like in on some real shit because I'm the only little dude there, wasn't no other little kids around. And I knew to be seen and not heard, you know what I'm saying? So I ain't say nothing. I wasn't speaking unless I was spoken to. And, I love being around them old dudes because I just thought they knew everything, the way they would talk with such command and authority. Uh, and they just like they were at home with themselves, and I just knew that they had all this vast experience. And, so to me, they were just world renowned. They were seasoned and, it's like I said, they just seemed like they were a wealth of information. And I just really got into it. And, I was especially proud, when they would comment to my father, they would tell my dad, Otis, yeah, Otis, your son is sure well behaved. He's a good boy. He's sharp too. He's sharp because, they talk to me and they ask you them questions that all the old black men had to ask you back then, which was like, what grade you in? And how you doing in school? How your grades, young man? How your grades? And at times getting all A's and B's, mostly A's, you know what I'm saying? I'm getting A's and B's, sir. You know what I'm saying? They were like, oh yeah, that's a good boy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you got a good little boy there, son. Yeah, 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 yeah. You know what I'm saying? So he's all into it like that. And so those were foundational moments for me, not only with my dad, but with the game of baseball. Now my dad, he liked the Cardinals like me, you know what I'm saying? But he was really a Dodgers man, you know what I'm saying? And we never really talked about it before he died or nothing as to why he was a Dodgers fan. But I imagine like a lot of black men, it's about Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella, and that kind of thing. All these brothers who, were like the first to like really break the color barrier. Not that my dad had been to New York, LA or LA in his lifetime because he hadn't, so I was a Cardinal fan and stuff, but in 75, I moved to South Bend, Indiana. And the first time I started watching baseball on TV on my own, you know, not with my father, but just on my own watching TV, baseball was the 75 World Series. That was the Cincinnati Reds and the Boston Red Sox. So Red Sox had like Carl Yastrzemski, Fred Lynn, Jim Rice, and they were like just bigger than life characters. You know what I'm saying? They were bigger than life. Uh, just seeing them on TV playing this game that I fell in love with. But the team that I really loved was the Big Red Machine. Like, well, first I'm a National League guy because the Cardinals were in the National League and the Dodgers were in the National League. So the Reds were in the National League, and I was going. So I just gravitated, even at the age of 8, to being a National League guy. You know what I mean? I'm already choosing sides. Um, and I love that Cincinnati Reds team. Watching them perform, I just like fell in love with them, as a child. So. Matter of fact, I could still name all of the Cincinnati Reds like start lineup from that team. You don't believe me? Okay, I'll do it for you. I knew you didn't believe me. So, first base, Tony Perez. Second base, Joe Morgan. Shortstop, Dave Concepcion. Third base, Pete Rose. Right field, Ken Griffey, Sr. Center field, Cesar Geronimo. Left field, George Foster. Catcher, Johnny Bench. A whole lot of Hall of Famers on that damn squad. You know what I'm saying? Whole lot of Hall of Famers on that squad. So that was my squad, And I ended up, like eventually I ended up going back to the Dodgers as a like a super adult later on, and went to Dodger Stadium several times. It's still the most beautiful ballpark in the world, in my opinion. And but I'm gonna warn you right now. I'm gonna be all over the place with this thing because I got so many thoughts in my head. But I try to bring them all together. But anyway, so I was in love with baseball and I played baseball. I was pretty damn good at it. In South Bend, I went to a K through 8 school, and I went out for the baseball team as a fourth grader. I moved there as a third grader, but I went out for the baseball team as a fourth grader. And I made the team. The team was a seventh and eighth grade team. So we didn't have like the equivalency of a middle school or elementary to middle school JV and varsity. No, we had one baseball team, which consisted of all seventh and eighth graders. And excuse me, I'm the only guy to make that team as a fourth grader. As a matter of fact, I was really small as a kid, and my coach used to call me little man. Hey, little man, go out to, second base. At that time I was playing second base. Go out, little man, go out to second base. We're gonna hit you some warm-ups. And I remember that none of my teammates would play catch with me because they were all seventh and eighth graders. I was just a little punk ass fourth grader, little bitty dude. And they'd be like, I ain't playing to catch with you, like we would be out there warming each other up before the game or before practice, throwing the ball back and forth to each other. And I remember being upset because nobody want to play catch with me. Yeah. So the coach had to play catch with me. And but I stuck with it. I stuck with it. Just like I'm doing with this video, recording this mug twice. Anyway, uh so, for various reasons, I had a really good youth baseball career, but for various reasons I moved and stuff like that. A lot of family stuff going on, a lot of things going on. So my baseball career was kind of derailed, at an early age, though I love the sport. Uh, but, but I still had my teams and I still went for it, and so, there was baseball. We'll get more into that later, but in football, same thing. You know how you kind of get introduced to a team early, and that's how they become your team. So in football, it ended up being the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's a gnat over here, and I'm gonna get his ass. He gonna fly close to me. He been bothering me, and I'm gonna get his ass. I'm gonna get his ass. I missed him. But I'm gonna get his ass though. I'm undefeated when it come to gnats and flies and stuff. Anyway, so football, football, it was the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's because my grandparents lived in a small town 18 miles south of Pittsburgh, 18 miles south of downtown Pittsburgh called New Kensington. And they were big Steelers fans, big Pirates fans. I remember my grandmother drinking that Iron City beer. Shout out Iron City. My grandma smoked her cigarettes and drank that Iron City beer, watching the Steelers, watching the Buccos, as she called them, the Pittsburgh Pirates. And one summer, they took me to Latrobe to the Steelers training camp. And I wasn't even really into football, but they took me to stay to Steelers training camp, and I knew all the names because I had heard them. So I got to actually meet and touch Mean Joe Green, John Stallworth, Lynn Swan, Franco Harris, Terry Bradshaw, Jack Ham, and Jack Lambert, Rocky Blyer, who after retiring, was a sportscaster at a local TV station. And even with the baseball, with the Pirates, I saw Dave Parker, who was a friend actually of my aunt Susie, rest in peace, Aunt Susie, who was lived in St. Louis all her life, and she was cool with Dave Parker. And so, we saw like Willie Stargell and stuff, and we was into that squad too. Mostly when I was there, it was a community thing. But Steelers became my team because of that experience. And the Pirates kind of my secondary team, again, with the Cobra, Dave Parker, Willie Stargell, with his Stargell stars he would put on a hat. You never get away with that today. Bill Matlock, Omar Marino, John Candelaria, Kent Tacovey. I mean, the memories. And I remember like all the names. And I'm going somewhere with this. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. In basketball, it was the Lakers, right? The Lakers were my team, and when Magic Johnson was a rookie. And this is because by this time again, I'm living in South Bend, Indiana, and I remember we had company over at the house, and they played the Lakers game. It was like on tape delay and stuff then, but played the Lakers game, and we had people over at the house. I'm gonna get them. I'm gonna get them. I hope I get them before the end of this show. Anyway, we watching the Lakers, and they were in the championship. They was playing on the finals, and they were playing the 76ers, who had Julius Erving, aka Dr. J. Now, I wasn't really a big NBA guy or a basketball guy for that matter, but I knew who Dr. J was because it was common knowledge, even if you didn't watch basketball, who Dr. J was. Matter of fact, I didn't even know his name was Julius Erving then. Like I got that on TV, but I knew who Dr. J was because his name was ubiquitous, in them streets. It was just like saying Gerald Ford or Jimmy Carter. Uh, the name was ubiquitous. And I saw LA and Magic being a 6'9" point guard, throwing them passes, making them shots, having a good time with Kareem, Norm Nixon, Jim Jones, Jamal Wilkes, Michael Cooper. That became my NBA team because it was like the first one that I saw. And I was attracted to their playing style and the way they got down. So, over the years I watched them win 10 championships, lose a few to the Celtics, the Pistons, respectively. And I was always the kind of guy that rooted for the front of the jersey, not really just the back, front of the jersey. Uh, and I hated the Celtics, but I respected their gangster, obviously. Like Larry Bird used to scare the shit out of me every time he had the ball. If it was at the end of the game, I'm like, scared to death of Larry Bird. Yeah, anyway. Like I said, hate Celtics, respected them. And I enjoyed Michael and the Bulls, in the 80s and, the 90s when they started winning. And I think for me, the defining thing and why I chose the teams that I chose was because I didn't know it at the time, but there was something about those teams that were about winning and excellence. And I've just always been a fan of winning and excellence. So, but I didn't know that at the time. I grabbed onto a team, and that's what it was. Because it's not like they were the only team that was winning, but I grew into it. So anyway, I messed with the Reds and the big red machine until they kind of got dismantled, and players started falling off, getting traded. Rose went to the Phillies and all of that. Uh, Later on, kind of checked out for a while. Kind of got back into the Cardinals during the Ozzie Smith, Terry Pendleton days, Lonnie Smith, Willie McGee, all of that. And Joaquin Andahar shout out. Those are some great teams. And then in the 90s, I got into the Braves. They had like Chipper Jones, Ron Gant. Pendleton was a Brave then, Dave Justice, Otis Nixon, uh, those bad boys, Smoltz, Maddox, Glavine, Avery, right? And again, it wasn't a bandwagon thing. It was just an excellent thing. Like if you was excellent and you had that tight, cold-blooded organization, I dig that. And if I got into it, I got into it. So, I like the Yankees for the same reason. And though I was a National League man, because again, being a Cardinal fan, National League, Dodgers, National League, Reds, National League. I didn't see a lot of American League teams because I lived in National League cities. And when I went to South Bend, we saw a lot more of the Chicago Cubs than, say, the Chicago White Sox because WGN had the Superstation. So we saw a lot of the Cub games. So I was a National League guy. But that being said, when the Dodgers was playing the Yankees and I was going for the Dodgers, when Reggie Jackson hit them 3 home runs in the 77 World Series, I couldn't argue. Like, I knew I was watching greatness because not only did he hit them home runs, like, it was like on the first pitch. And he did with this attitude. And, it was majestic because he was an unapologetic black man. And even then, I knew that Reggie Jackson was the kind of guy who was unapologetic. Hey, you know what this is? I am the star. I am the straw that stirs the drink, and as he described it, he was even impressed with himself when he talked about, in his words, and I quote, the magnitude of me. You know, so I love that dude. Even though he didn't play for my squad, again, he was great. So, uh, anyway, and I dig with I dug the Cardinals during the Pujols days and all that, so. Kicked it with the Lakers and the Steelers throughout the Super Bowls, the NBA championships, the losses, the draft picks, the heartbreaks. Uh, I don't care whether it was Kobe and Shaq or Nick Van Exel, Eddie Jones, Smush Parker, Big Shot Rob, you name it, hell, Anthony Peeler, um, and even like when the Steelers, when they got off the dynasty team and they transitioned, to like the likes of Neil O'Donnell or Cordell Stewart, Bubby Brister, then eventually Hines Ward, Big Ben, James Harrison. Winning, losing, heartbreak, and triumph. I always stuck with them because I knew that even if they lost, it was never because they didn't care. Not only as a team, but as an organization. That team wanted to win. And there was an expectation that when you come here to this city and you put this uniform on, it ain't like putting on them other uniforms where you're just gonna get paid and they're gonna just be happy. You know, you got to come here and be ready to win. And that's a standard is a standard, whether it was Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, or Mike Tomlin. As Mike Tomlin would say, the standard is a standard. I can keep name dropping, but hopefully you get the point. And I'm going somewhere. My love for these particular sports team wasn't just like for the teams themselves. Got him. Got him. Well, no, it's one more. I got one. There's one more sitting right on top of my computer, but I just got one. Now, as long as he sit there, he gonna be fine. If he come off and start messing with me, he gonna end up like his boy. Anyway, and I digress. So as I was saying, these teams provided a light, a pathway, an example of excellence and expectation that I adopted into my own life. And I really took it seriously. I used to live and die with them Shaq and Kobe Lakers. And I remember watching what I was watching at home over a friend's house, just jumping for joy, being into every possession, standing up at the TV, shouting, talking, just crazy. And if they lost for like the rest of the year, that whole get knocked out of playoff thing, so your season's over, I would like be mourning for like a week, like a week. Uh, but again, I knew that the organization was about winning. So I felt like that I had the same standard they had the same standard I had. It was Pat Riley, Sparky Anderson with the Reds, Tommy Lasorda's racist ass, don't at me because he was racist. It was about the winning and not just getting paid. So, and that's the thing about fandom. That's the thing about fandom. Like, this is the point that I'm getting to. The thing about fandom is it's not really real, but it is. It's not real in that they don't pay me. I ain't a part of the team. I didn't sign the contract, you know? But I have said we 100 million times when it comes to the games and the stakes at hand. We gonna win. When we play y'all, when we play Philly, when we play Dallas, when we play, we gonna beat, we gonna do this, we gonna draft, blah, 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 all of that. And that comes with like that childlike being invested. That's the thing about being a fan. It's short for fanatic. But, lately, not lately, but like for the last few years, things have started to change. And they changed for the worst. And when they started to change for the worst, it started to get me to the point of, let me shout out Bomani Jones because he would put it this way. I had to get off that narcotic. Or if you say like Ice Cube, that narcotica. Got to get off that narcotica, you know? And you know what changed? Like many things change. So for the Lakers, for instance, Jerry Buss died. Jeannie got it done, with Phil and the gang, even with LeBron. And she and her brothers kind of had this toxic thing going for real. And after a while, Jeannie got rid of Jerry West. Well, I don't know if it was Jeannie or if it was Dr. Buss that fell out with Jerry West, but I think I know Buss was old if he was still living, but we lost Jerry West, and I thought that was crazy for that iconic figure, the logo, to leave the team. And then he goes with the Golden State Warriors and ends up giving us Clay, Steph, and Draymond. So he was really the architect of that dynasty team. Magic got into ownership and then he was manager and all that kind of a GM type of thing. But he really wasn't into doing the work. They said this dude be in his office watching Family Feud all day. Same thing like for the Steelers. They were excellent for a long time, but then the old man Rooney died. He left the team to his kids. And, the league would start changing, the finances changing, and so everything started changing. And these changes just turned out not to be in the best interest of the fans. I saw it coming with the Steelers years ago. What I didn't know at the time until I started to suspect it about 5 years ago that Mike Tomlin didn't really have the say in the organization overall that normal head coaches have. And it was after he retired that I learned that he didn't really have that much power, right? He didn't hire his own assistants or nothing like that. Mike Tomlin's greatness was that he mastered being the man who said the things and took the heat in front of the camera. And he set the tone for the team and the organization within the confines of the walls. And he did those things very well. But when you start to see the ineptitude over the last few years, especially related to the quarterback position, the way they let now, like letting Aaron Rodgers, toxic, washed up ass, stall the progress of the franchise, I had to get off that narcotic. Okay. Um, the latest with the Lakers, some of you may know, a team again that I love since the age of 11 and 12. They sold to a guy who basically held his team for 9 months before selling again to one of the Kushner brothers. I don't remember his first name anymore off the top, but and Bob Iger, who used to run Disney and ESPN, because he needed cash because he's facing SEC and Department of Justice charges for tax evasion. So for the Lakers, I had to get off that narcotic. Okay. For the first time in my life, I'm like, I'm over it because it's not my Lakers team anymore. It's not my Steelers team anymore. I mean, they hired Mike McCarthy. They're towing their whole identity to Aaron Rodgers, who's washed up. So it's like, please, as far as I'm concerned, this team, the Steelers particularly, are relying on their diehard fans to remain committed to their ineptitude because name and tradition alone. It's like they saying, fuck it. The Steelers fans will come. And for many, they will. They will. So as many as you know, many of you know, I live in Columbus, Ohio, and this state is really divided between four main teams: the Browns, the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Cowboys. So obviously we're only 3.5 hours from Pittsburgh. We are 2 hours from Cleveland, 2 hours from Cincinnati, a little less than that to Cincinnati. And let me tell you, Browns fans, Bengals fans, they roll hard. And neither one of them have ever won a Super Bowl. The Bengals have been to two Super Bowls. But when I tell you Browns fans are heavy of all ages, mostly, I see mostly like people my age, late 50s, going into their 60s, love the Browns. Wear their gear, merch. They got the folding chair. There's a Steelers group here that they're like motorcycle group and they all Steelers fans too. So they got the vest, the cuts and all of that. They got their own clubs. They got all these teams got bars that they meet at every Sunday for the different games and stuff. So I'm like, it's really serious, really serious. So many of them, they gonna get down. As like myself, I'm sure they got it from childhood because no way you can like the Browns and the Bengals for this long and not get that shit from childhood, right? So I'm still holding on to the Dodgers to a degree because I see the consistency and the will to win, but again, their owner is the same guy who sold the Lakers, and he's still cash strapped. As a matter of fact, it was kind of funny because the Dodgers went to the White House because they won two World Series in a row. Went to the White House recently, and this same owner uh, gave the Orange Man a World Series ring. Now, there's never been a team owner who gave a president a world championship ring. It's just never happened. But I think he was smart because he thinking to himself, I got these federal charges, and there might come a time when I need me a pardon. And the Orange Man is all about pardoning rich people, right? Rich criminals in particular. It's like he identifies with them, right? Of course. So, but shout out to Mookie Betts. And for those couple other Dodgers who didn't go, he said he had something to do. He just had a baby. So he was like, I got a new baby. So good for him. But as these business models have changed, and along with changes in ownership, so have the values, because now you got these private equity companies stuff coming in, and so you can't even afford to go to a game anymore. There are no avenues for the average fan, and there's a lot of other things that have come into play too that have again turned my allegiance away because it stopped being what it used to be. So let's talk about why. Again, some of these reasons why. One of the first things that turned me off, and it started with the NFL, and that was this thing called fantasy sports, fantasy football. And for those who don't know, fantasy football is a really, really big deal now. It has been for years, and it seems like it keeps growing every year. There are people who are like on 5 or 10 fantasy football teams. They put money into it, they follow it, they get serious about it. They be threatening players. Like if that player doesn't do a certain amount of good things on Sunday, they will tweet this player, be all in their Instagram and their DMs, threatening them, talking about them, talking all kind of trash to them because they didn't perform. But the issue that I had, and I've never gotten into fantasy football, was because I'm a team guy. So if I have to pick, like say a Jamar Chase, for instance, which would be a great pick. If you're picking a fantasy team and you need a wide receiver, Jamar Chase is a great guy to pick. But if you're playing the Steelers, I don't want him to do well. And I don't want to have this conflict of do I root for Jamar Chase to get 150 yards and 3 touchdowns so I can win my fantasy this week? Or do I hope he gets 2 catches for 2 yards because I want the Steelers to win, right? I guess I'm just old like that. I didn't want that conflict. So I couldn't split the baby that way. All right. So I never got into fantasy football and it kind of eroded some of it for me because now you got all this fantasy coverage. You got whole TV programs that are devoted to fantasy football. And so even watching the coverage, it's like, man, I don't want to sit here and listen to 15, 20, 30 minutes of who you should fucking pick for your fantasy team. It took all the fun out of it for me as a pure fan of the sport and of the teams, the teams you want to root for and the teams you want to root against. Those are all fundamental into the basics of being a sports fan. So the second domino to fall, piggybacking off the first of this fantasy thing, was because people they gamble on these fantasy teams. So as you know, you're seldom in a fantasy team without any money being involved. Most of the time it's small, but there are people like even celebrities who place big ass money on their fantasy teams, right? So but again, piggybacking off that whole gambling tip is the leagues allowing gambling companies to partner with the leagues. Now, obviously, for decades, it was considered uncouth, unethical, all kinds of negativity associated with gambling, because you got point shaving, stuff like that. You go back to the Black Sox scandal. Um, you can go to Pete Rose. You can go to the NBA with Terry Rozier recently, one of the Porter brothers. You had point shaving in the NCAA. You had shout out Tim Donaghy, who obviously did his things for the Lakers against the Sacramento Kings. He went to jail, and it used to be like that. If you was gonna get caught up in gambling, you had to get caught up with some gangsters, right? They had to set you up at the hotel. Like they would have to find him a Tim Donaghy and get him on the hook some kind of way, whether it's through a prostitute or something, you know, where they get him caught up and then they'd be like, all right, we got you by the balls, so you're gonna do what we say. Like the good old days. The good old days when they used to have to get you to, they used to have to set you up to get you to go for this bullshit. Get you hemmed up for real. But now we got the casino right here in your pocket. Shout out to Adam Silver, who was the first professional sports commissioner to acquiesce to this. Because you see, the main thing with these teams now, especially with the private equity and the billionaire class owning all of them, is that it's all about making money. So you got the TV deals, you got the merch, you got ticket sales and all of that. You already got a salary cap too, except for Major League Baseball. But so you got cost certainty and the whole nine, but it's like they want more. They gotta have more, more, more. So the gambling companies come in like, hey, we got more. We got some of this free money. And they have allowed that money to corrupt their sports because there's always going to be some suspect in the game. That's the reality of it. So, and the other thing that you have is the TV partnerships. So now instead of you having like ESPN, they used to have journalists, but they were never really a journalistic station. They were really an entertainment station. Like the E in ESPN stands for entertainment. Um, but they had journalists. They had journalists. But they're so intertwined now with the teams that they don't really have journalists anymore doing journalistic work. It's very, very rare. And I could think of like a Kyle Shanahan, for instance, who's the coach of the 49ers. He got in a car accident and it took like 8 days, a severe car accident. It took like 8 days for anything to get out of it. And we still don't know the details. It was like some lady involved, and they said it was her fault, but then you didn't really hear from her. It just seemed like it was probably some drunk driving or it was some chick in the car that wasn't supposed to be in there. It was some salacious in there that we didn't hear about this car accident. And then you had look at your boy Ned York, who owns the 49ers, that same team. He gets caught in a trailer park in Ohio trying to get a prostitute for $140. Now, this dude's a billionaire. The team was given to him by his daddy. Okay. And even Bob Kraft, who had his own thing with sex trafficking Asian girls at the massage parlor in Florida, you wonder, like, I don't know. I don't know what it is with billionaire guys who don't want to pay the premium price for their companionship. Okay. Now, I've heard of stories of both NBA and Major League Baseball players. Major League Baseball players play 81 games a year on the road. NBA players play 41 games on the road. Now, I've heard well, both of them have situations where they got their wives over here, they got their girlfriends over there. They be buying their girlfriends condos, a car, and so they know when they go to this city, this what's up. I'm gonna hook up with you, yada yada yada, and then I'm gonna bounce. I don't really pay you to show up. I pay you to leave, right? And they know that there's a premium for that kind of interaction, right? But for whatever reason, these white boy owners, why this dude's team, York, why this dude's team is getting ready for the season, he in a trailer park in Ohio, getting busted for offering to pay $140 for a sex worker. Make it make sense. But that being said, ESPN's like the biggest partner the NFL has, so much so that they've even combined their networks. You think ESPN have reported this shit for real? Negatory. No. Okay. But let there be a black player that got caught up like that. Uh, let that be. We go back to Bomani Jones. He has two reasons when he said he got off a narcotic. One was the Atlanta Falcons. The reason he got off the Atlanta Falcons was because I believe this guy's name was Eugene Robinson. Don't quote me, but his last name was Robinson. He was the NFL Man of the Year. And on the night before the Super Bowl, he gets caught up in soliciting prostitution. Okay. His other team was Atlanta Hawks. He let them go when they traded Dominique Wilkins. A true man of the people was Dominique. Okay. So, but anyway, meanwhile, this same team, the 49ers, right? Same team. They they got they got rid of blackball Colin Kaepernick. But yet they got this Bosa cat out here, openly MAGA, and liking social media posts after Ryan Clark got fired and publicly humiliated on national TV. That's cool, right? So you just got all these conflating, convoluting interests that just takes the fun out of it for the fan. Which kind of brings me to my final take in this area. It's controversy dealing with Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. So a lot of Cleveland fans and fans of other football teams are in an uproar because the Browns selected the nasty man to be the starter of the team. And he was horrible. in preseason so far. He had a horrible press conference the other day where he blamed the fans for hating on him and all this. And you hear all this judgment, because he's a horrible person. He seems like he's a horrible person. And, he was mostly injured since he had all these legal issues and had to settle them all out of court, all kinds of money to these like 23 different women that massaged him. And then he just acted a total ass, a total fool, all out of hand, right? And again, he hadn't performed well in the preseason. So the fans want Shador Sanders to play. And I dig it. I understand it. Personally, I think Shador still hold on to the ball too long. He doesn't process information very quickly. He did that at Colorado, and I believe he did it. He's done that so far with the Browns as well. But I digress. But a lot of people just want them to cut Watson and start Shador. But what they don't understand is, and nobody's acknowledging this because they're talking about all these football reasons as fans. Short again, fan short for fanatic. They're talking about all these football reasons, but they forget the other reasons. They guaranteed this man $250 million, a quarter of a B with a B. So if you think that's a good investment or a bad investment, you think they're gonna pay that man this kind of money to sit on his ass? For real? Would you? Would you? I know I wouldn't. Now I wouldn't have signed him to that contract. I wouldn't have. But if it's so ever I did, I'm not gonna sit up here and pay. I'm I'm not gonna pay this man a quarter of a billion to sit on the bench. I wish I might. Shit. So whether you think that's a good or a bad investment really don't matter. And even this one brother was like, he's on my social media and he was like, Chris, they should just cut him. Okay, so yeah, if they cut him, it's a little over $68.2 million in dead cap space. So that's tying up your shit. You can't even sign other players. But you see, again, these are fans. So they're looking at this in this pure altruistic, what's best for the team, old school thinking. When, hey man, them days is over, son. The league, the owners, they want you to keep that same energy, right? Because they want you to buy them tickets, they want you to buy them merch, watch them games, keep that money flowing to their asses. There's no accountability to you. I mean, Jimmy Haslam, who owns the Browns. You think he give a damn about Browns fans? This is the same dude who picked Johnny Manziel number one because a homeless man told him to. Homeless man told him, hey man, I'm sorry, I ain't gonna do no impression because I don't want to make fun of homeless people. But a homeless man told this dude, the owner of a team, not his scouting department, not the people he paid to go look at film, not the people he paid to go look at the games, not the people that he pays money to send them on trips to see these college players play, to evaluate the talent at the combine. No, cat sitting there with a drink in his hand, cold chilling on the corner, maybe with an old English 800 or some MD 2020 or some Wild Irish Rose. Yeah, man, I think you should pick Johnny Manziel. He's the man. Okay. You fucking kidding me? Right? Again, same man who got into trouble because he was making illegal payments, allegedly, to executives to boost the value of this particular company that he had before selling it to Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway. Allegedly. So, as I close this, I would say for you, everybody's not like me. I'm saying all these entities took the love of the game, the love of being a fan away from me. I never thought that it was all perfect. I never thought it was super altruistic or anything like that. But it was an ideal. The thing about being a fan is the ideal of the sport. It's the ideal of the community and the camaraderie and whatnot. That's me. I mean, you do you. You like who you like. It's America. Sports are still a really good distraction from all the bullshit we have to deal with in this life. You know, as for me, my fandom now has been kind of relegated to being a simple fan of excellence. So I don't care who you are, who you play for. If you're talented, you show that talented in wonderful ways. You show continuity. You know, I enjoy watching the Spurs. I enjoy seeing the Knicks, what they did. If you're talented, you do your thing. I'm gonna watch you. I'm gonna be happy for you, and I'm gonna appreciate you for the entertainment you provide. You know, um, right now, my biggest thing is watching the Lynx, the Minnesota Lynx, and the Las Vegas Aces, that WNBA thing, because I'm really into Olivia Miles and Asia Wilson, and I'm like wondering like, okay, will Olivia Miles be the first person to win MVP and Rookie of the Year since Candace Parker? Like, and who's gonna come out of the West? Who's gonna come out of the West when the Aces play the Lynx? Like, that's gonna be tight. So I really appreciate like those rivalries. The W is in great shape, minus all these racist and stupid ass people who are making something out of nothing, who don't give a shit about women's sports, who are just there to troll and make trouble. These motherfuckers ain't been there for the 30 years that I've been there watching the W. And a whole lot of other people been there watching the W. They ain't been there, ain't gave a fuck. But now they all on here talking all this kind of shit. All these culture wars is just fucking insane. Insane, I say. Insane. But I digress. But like I said, man, hey, as for having a team the Dodgers like, the last of the Mohicans, I got my eyes on them though. I got my eyes on them, and I'm gonna see what happens. But otherwise, I'm off that narcotic, right? Because the dope has been stepped on. It ain't the same no more. It ain't the same potency. It don't get you high like it used to. It don't hit. Now it's just kind of watered down as with all kinds of compromises, whether it's the gambling, whether it's the lack of journalistic coverage. It was always entertainment, but now it's so much entertainment now. The marketing has just gone all wrong. And you even got like even Steve Ballmer and the way that's another example of networks not covering leagues properly in terms of their journalistic features. You got a guy who used to work for ESPN and Pablo Torre who won a Pulitzer Prize for this reporting on Steve Ballmer and the Clippers, basically giving, not even basically, giving Kawhi Leonard at least three side deals where he had no show contracts um, to perform services, or it's all the way backwards, to not perform services, to get millions of dollars to do nothing. So they were circumvent the salary cap. Now, you already got a salary cap. You don't, to me, that's a whole nother story. I'm gonna get to that in another podcast. Why I hate salary caps and why there should be no salary caps. Steve Ballmer should be able to pay Kawhi Leonard whatever the hell he want to pay. If he the richest owner, so be it. We say we live in a free market society. Damn it, it need to be free market. That's the way I feel. If you can't hang, if you can't pay, sell the team. Sell the team. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your sob ass story about your small market, about how you don't have enough TV revenue. Fucking sell the team. If you ain't got it, you ain't got it. Because that's what you would tell me. That's what you tell me. That's another story. We'll deal with that in another show. We will deal with that in another show. Because again, that's another thing that the fans buy into. Fans buy into that. He make too much money. They shouldn't pay him all that. You are what you can negotiate. And we either in a free market society or we're not. I had a conversation with a brother the other day, uh, where he's like, college players should be capped at $500,000. Why? He didn't have a good reason. It's the fan that fan got people caping up for owners. And I've never heard of a team being priced out or having or an owner having to give up his team. I gotta sell my team. Why? Because salaries are just too high and I can't afford it. Never happened in the history of sports. But that's what fans do. See, that's fan got you playing yourself. I'm looking at this gnat. Boy, he's a slick one. Anyway, so again, that dope been stepped on. I'm done with it. I'm just gonna watch, be a casual observer. If you good, I'm just gonna hope you continue to be good. I'm for the young players. Hopefully they can do their thing. I'm still gonna follow LeBron and hope, he can do something with the Sixers. Hey, I'm old school. I'm old school. So it is what it is. So anyway, with that, I will close. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking with me through this second broadcast. Thankfully, you didn't have to watch the first because it had no sound to it. Hopefully, this will have some sound to it. We'll see. I am the producer. I am the director. I do all the things. So again, like, subscribe, and tell me, man, hey, how do you feel about sports now? Have anything changed for you? Or if you're a person of a certain age like myself, has anything changed? Has anything made things different for you than what they used to be in terms of how you look at sports? It's private equity, gambling, or all that. Or is it the same? Have you just kind of rolled along with the changes? Some people just roll along with the changes and they're good with it. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's really nothing wrong with that. For me, I'm just a little more of a purist. I want my sports to be authentic. I don't want them tainted. Uh, I want like the pure. I want the pureness, or at least what I think is the pureness of it. Whether it's covering it from a journalist perspective, the inside stories and stuff like that, the controversies, the tension, the infighting or whatever, and then the overcoming to get to where you want to be. I love those stories. Those are great stories. And I think they're good for sports. So, uh, oh, yo, guess what? I just rubbed this thing off my hand. I got that gnat. I didn't see him, but I got him. He's not fly. I got him. I got them both. 2 for 2 before the end of the show. Mission accomplished. All right. Y'all stay safe. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, do all the things. And we see you next time. Peace.